We're dedicated to supporting a global community of independent filmmakers with a singular ambition to try and help grow a more sustainable, a more robust ecosystem for independent journalism and documentary film. So the way in which our little community works, and let's be clear, in the kind of glorious spectrum of film and media, independent documentary filmmakers are kind of like over here. We're tiny but tenacious. I think we could say the profile of the community is that it's obviously often a singularly lonely practice as an independent filmmaker. Filmmaking often carried out over years with pitifully few resources, sometimes at genuinely high risk, and often with little certainty about the way the story is even going to pan out or what will happen with that story once you finish making it. And in that context, cultural networks, networking, is literally life-saving. You know, it offering moments of transfer of ideas and of inspiration, access to markets, to funding, to distribution, and also solidarity, which in the practice and artist practice is so critical. And the other thing that we've kind of delight in at Doc Society is trying to encourage our little community to extend their networks beyond the usual suspects and make radical new collaborations with other parts of civil society. And I want to tell you in brief about one program we run called Good Pitch, which began as a little experiment in Oxford 10 years ago and has now become a kind of global movement. And it's this simple idea that we could connect independent filmmakers with social justice movements and see what happens when independent film is put at the heart of movement and campaigning. What does that look like? What does that mean to the life of the film? What does that mean about making sure that film reaches audiences that matter, underserved communities? And it transgresses lots of kind of traditional lines. But actually we found the radical collaboration really works, and all of those ideas and that germination and that programme has been made possible by colleagues like Creative Europe, but also British Council and others. So with all of that, it won't be a surprise to you that we are a big believer. I'd say we are ferocious and passionate about the power of networks and of being conveners. And some of that activity we carry out is pretty formal. Some of it is a lot less formal. And I think after 13 years of this work, that one of the keys is probably to remain as flexible and as agile as possible to the needs of the community, the changing needs of our community. But this is a day of inspiration and learning, and so I'm absolutely delighted that we're going to get to hear now from three brilliant women who lead three very different networks to hear what they've made and how they've made it. So first up, can I welcome Vanessa Reed, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a real delight to be here. I'm Chief Executive of PRS Foundation, which is the UK's leading funder of new music and talent development. And the network that I'm going to talk to you about today is called Keychange. It's a very new network. It's something that we have set up with funding from Creative Europe, from the Small Cooperation Project funding. And I've been asked to share just a few kind of eureka moments or observations about this network that hopefully will fuel some of the discussion later on. And we've got some slides. I just want to show you a couple of images. So I'm not quite sure if mine are going to come up next, but let's see. Yes, they are. Brilliant. So Keychange is now already an international programme which is investing in emerging female talent whilst also encouraging festivals from across the world to sign up to a 50-50 gender balance pledge by 2022. What's been really incredible about this project, which isn't one of the formal kind of European cultural networks, which I also really believe in and I've worked with in previous roles throughout my career, is that it's something that has really morphed and grown incredibly quickly, and it shows you the power of that connectivity when you really find a very urgent and strong reason for being. So that's my first observation. The most powerful networks have a really clear sense of purpose, and you can always answer that question, why do you exist? And that's why I'm showing you this slide. You might remember, I think this was back in 2015, 2015 when this first started, but big campaigns on social media about the lack of women in festival lineups on music stages across the country, and then more generally the revelation that the gender gap in the music industry was particularly severe. That's the thing that really got us talking to our colleagues across Europe about what we could do. How could we fix this problem? How could we start moving things on? So I think it's that strong starting point that has been very key to the success of this particular network. The other thing I wanted to say is that we all, particularly in arts and culture, we love the idea of everything being bottom up and grassroots and organic, etc. But actually, I also think we need to acknowledge that networks, in the first instance, are an intervention. Somebody has to lead them. Somebody has to kind of pull everyone together around that strong kind of question that you're tackling. And I think also as the network develops, often you'll start creating scenarios and situations that create new possibilities that you couldn't have imagined before that network existed. So our example is that at the heart of this programme, which has 6 core festival partners, there's also a talent development initiative which involves now 60 female artists and innovators who are coming together at different festivals. And when we first brought them together in Tallinn earlier this year in March, they were a bit reticent and a little bit cynical. You know, why are we taking time out of our busy schedules to be here? And then by the end of that festival, one of the women came up to me and said, "I've never felt so safe." And then others were saying it's just been so empowering to realise that they could spend time with women who are at the same stages in their career, facing the same challenges, thanks to this new network and new opportunities. So I think intervention is a good thing, and we shouldn't be embarrassed by that. The other quick thing I wanted to say is that small beginnings can really quickly morph into a global movement if you get that starting point right. So in that red box in the top corner there, those are the core founding partners, 6 European festivals. We had Creative Europe funding, as I mentioned, and now over 120 festivals from Hong Kong and Brazil to Nova Scotia and New York and lots of European festivals in between have signed up to our 50-50 gender balance pledge. They're all inviting us to go and speak at their festivals, to be part of what has now become a movement that's almost kind of, it's extending outwards in a way that we just never expected. And in some ways, I hope it continues to extend in a way that we can't necessarily control. I want it to really spin off as far as it can. So that's been a huge inspiration. And then my final point, we all know in our world of the arts and creative industries that we often talk to ourselves. There's an echo chamber. And what's been really important for me with this network is it's demonstrating that cultural networks which have a really clear sense of purpose can break beyond that echo chamber and can really start stimulating a public debate and questioning the status quo outside of our communities. So when we began, we never realised we'd end up generating over £10 million worth of press coverage across the world, from a very uncomfortable interview I had to do on CNN with a real kind of sceptic about the whole programme, through to lots of very supportive articles in European press. So cutting through beyond the echo chamber. And then also the other thing we hadn't expected is that we'd be told by the European Commission at this stage in our programme, which has actually only really been running for 6 months, they have changed the criteria in the next funding round of European cultural funding to include more detail around the gender equality expectations. So already we've had a very, very tangible impact. And this all, of course, means that I would say, I can put my hand on my heart, this would not have happened without Creative Europe funding. And so I'm really delighted that we heard from our DCMS colleague that there is an intention for us to continue with UK's participation in the education and culture funding. And I think that stimulus is really something we need to start thinking about how we can work together more. And I really hope that that continues. Thank you.
IETM, what do we do? Well, first of all, we have this golden star on I have my golden star on my badge, which means that we are one of those European networks supported by the Creative Europe program, and we are one of the largest and also one of the oldest European cultural networks. What we do, no surprise, we facilitate networking, about which later, but we also support our members in to become better in their day-to-day practice. So we have staff exchange programs in the summer campus, and offer some training, etc. And not in the last place, we advocate for the sector on several levels. First of all, for a proper European budget for culture. And this was in the context of the multi-financial framework, one of our main priorities for the last months, but also especially for a proper position of the performing arts in funding schemes, both on European level, on national level, and on local level, realizing that contemporary performing arts is not the easiest to market or to get to be understood by politicians. IETM started in a time with an iron curtain still firmly in place, with no internet, no low-cost flights, no Airbnb, and international cultural relations mainly done by ministries and embassies as a one-to-one affair, let's say in the Stone Age. Nevertheless, its core identity didn't change much since. Yes, the membership has grown into 500 membership organizations and some individuals at the moment. We have opened up to the rest of the world, so we are not only European, but include now 50 countries around the globe. And we run this so-called EU network project, which brings in half of our budget, but at the same time requires to produce tangible impact, and preferably on short term, which is a real challenge, because networking goes slowly. There's this African verb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, take others, or go with others. And far is not always fast. But we believe in networking being, first of all, a social event, something live that has to be experienced live. The only way to reach critical mass and to create real trust between people is when they meet live. So we organized an increasing number of live meetings, twice a year, big ones. And I can tell you the next one will be in November in Munich, but at the Brexit weekend, we will be in Hull during the Brexit weekend. And we also organized 3-4 times smaller meetings. I'm on my way to Wales now, in and beyond Europe. Oh, my first slide is not even here. This was my first slide. Just note our mission. And I go now to the second slide to tell you why people like IETM. It's not a conference, it's not a market, it's a social gathering around urgent topics for the sector. We gather in our membership and in our meetings, which are open for, not only open for members, but also for non-members. We gather representatives from the whole produce chain, from universities, educational institutions, up till funders, but mainly the main part are the producers and the presenters of contemporary performing arts. All events are organized with restrained budgets and in collaborations with a local member, while members act as moderators, speakers, tutors, presenters, or guides. So what's the value we offer in order to receive about 1,500 people a year visiting our meetings and pay for a membership? I think people like to belong. People like to connect internationally, to learn from each other and to get inspired, to hear each other's experiences, to take part in a cross-cultural dialogue. People also value the diversity of our membership. It takes them out of their bubble. It's been said before. People like to test their skills and to improve their skills in a relatively safe place, speaking in public, intercultural communication, inclusion strategies, ecological awareness. These are all type of things where we try to develop our policies as a member and want to test them. And when we are speaking about it in an international and open atmosphere. People want to test also their own opinions or their practices. And of course, they want to find partners for cooperation projects. And as we heard, sometimes that is very successful as well. And thank God it is. But most of all, I think people like to defend, and that's what we are very happy to hear from our membership survey, that people really like to be part, not only being part of a global community, but also a community that is really defending the value of the arts. And I think networking is also a lot about building friendships that last far longer than your productive years and go far beyond talking about your work. Thank you.
Oddly, I have been deeply unsuccessful in securing any support from any of the European networks that are here today. So I feel like a real fraud in being totally, absolutely unsuccessful in every occasion that I've applied over the past 15 years for any sort of European support. So it's quite strange that I'm here. But I have, for me, networks is it's a massive, it's a thought process, I guess. So I believe myself to be a part of a global network of disabled artists and practitioners who work in isolation in most part in terms of creating work, but actually due to technology, so due to the internet and due to other forms of technology, we are able to connect continually and support each other in online spaces, and that's the biggest network that I belong to. And that's been going, and I've been involved in that for 30 years. So again, you know, from the ancient times when there was no internet, when there was no Twitter, when, you know, email was just birthing itself. And that has given me a great deal of strength and support over time as a practitioner, and in developing into becoming a producer, producing my own work and taking it around the world and traveling with it. I guess my strongest networks exist in the US and now in Rwanda. So it's quite nice to have a new network in Rwanda that no one knows about. That's quite cool. That I spend a lot of time in Rwanda developing practice and working with disabled practitioners and non-disabled practitioners, but actually looking at genocide and looking at working with a festival for humanity, for the sake of humanity, and that's a massive sort of, for me, that's just the best work that I do. But none of that pays the rent. So I have like a proper job, and it's running this thing called the Creative Diversity Network, which is essentially the UK Broadcasting's membership body for diversity. So when we talk about networks, this is the most powerful network. This is one of the most powerful networks that exists in the world, because my board are the chief executives and the director general of the BBC. They are an executive board, and they employed me, God bless them. So for 14 years, they'd been having this peripatetic thing that they passed between each other, and everyone was great for 2 years because they funneled all of their diversity work through it, and then they threw it all away. And then in 2014, they said, no, we're going to have an organisation, a third-party organisation that will look after our large monitoring project called Diamond, which is sort of looking at who makes television in the UK, who's on television in the UK, and just monitoring the diversity makeup, or not, or as the case may be, of people working in UK broadcasting. And there was a previous incumbent, and then oddly they employed me. So they are sort of in a position where, and that's my eureka moment, that actually the will to change makes a big difference. And the will to change with decision makers, and I mean real decision makers, has been phenomenal for me for still not 2 years yet. I'm still 6 weeks away from 2 years, which they all are surprised by. I'm surprised I'm still in the job, and they're surprised that I haven't done 2 years yet. You know, we were working on aligning our expectations, but it's the greatest thing to be able to talk to all of these people in the way that I do, and for them to understand what I'm saying, and B, what I'm trying to achieve, and to say yes. For them to say yes, to hear the word yes from chief executives, from a director general, from some of the biggest C-suite names in the country in UK broadcasting. And their network is not just European, so there is obviously the conversation about country of origin and all of those questions that are happening around television with the Brexit conversation. But they sit in a global landscape, and their network is a completely different space. And I'm playing catch-up in some ways, but actually having lived in a global network in terms of my practice and identity for so long, we are actually quite aligned in our expectation and understanding of the world around us. I am literally, unfortunately can't stay this afternoon because I'm literally going to ask them for money this afternoon.
Go you.
It's not a lot of money, but it's money. And this requires me to be polite and, compliant and all that shit. So I've got to go and eat some food and calm down after this. And then I'm going to ask them again tomorrow for their names. So I'm going to ask them for endorsement tomorrow. And then after that, it'll all be fine, because they're going to say yes. And even if they don't know it yet, they're going to say yes. They are. So there will be announcements coming over the next few weeks around things that we are doing and just how we are beginning to really connect our network to other global networks that want to be doing and are doing this thing. And it is about diversity. All of it is about diversity. All of it is about representing those who are underrepresented, giving voice to those who are never heard, never seen, invisible, dismissed, and again, it is for the sake of humanity, basically, that I do what I do.
Okay, so from this morning's amazing kind of contributions, observations, I've heard about good networks being a source of influence, a place to share skills, resources, ideas, and inspiration. I loved your intervention around the idea that a powerful network should have a clear sense of purpose. I thought that was, and that they're an intervention, don't be embarrassed by it. I thought that was really astute too. And
Can I say something? I just thought Deborah's point about the power of saying yes, which was actually referring to your board, but I think that really resonated for me because that's actually what networks are about. It's about this framework which people have an option to join in with. I know this is a bit unfortunate in the context of Brexit because it's about that sort of binary yes or no. Do I want to be part of it? Do I want to be in the club? Or do I want to be outside of it? And I suppose it's really that that's been so exciting with Keychange is that all these people who've approached us as we've talked about the programme, they've all just been saying, we want to join in. We say yes to that value that you're promoting, and that's incredibly inspiring. So I suppose that's the one thing that we can all know that we're promoting with the membership of all of our different networks, which are across border, which are across the whole of Europe and international, that whatever's happening at the political level, on the ground, everyone is saying yes.
I was at a network meeting last week in New York at Ford Foundation, and there was this amazing gathering of social justice organisations. I think I was the only media person, but and there was this activist that stood up, Black Lives Matter activist stood up, and she said, for her, one of the defining principles of a great or effective network is where there is transfer of power. And I was like, it's been burning in my head. And I took it back to the team yesterday. We had a team meeting, and I was like, guys, I think we need to adjust our mission statement. What if we actually baked it in that part of our function, but literally part of our mandate is not in a kind of ad hoc or a kind of like, now and then or on the side or as an accidental side effect. What if it was transfer of power? I just wondered, does that resonate with you?
Totally. Yesterday I was... I am gentle with my board, by the way, and with all of the organisations. But we speak as we find. We operate on an honesty basis. So yesterday I was at a meeting with a head of programming and commissioning at one of the UK channels, and we were having a long conversation about class and stuff like this, and he was determined to second guess me about class. So he had to be schooled, obviously. But he sort of had that thing about him where he was like, we're 80% partial. What are we going to do about it? And it's really terrible. And I'm like, yeah, it is. Well, why don't 50% of you just quit? And then that 50% of the 80% will be gone, and then there's space. He didn't like that answer, and I think there is something about being genuine about that. I have informed them. When we talk about leadership programs or anything that I do, I say my mission is to find you people that will take your jobs away from you in 3 years, that will put the fear of God into you, into terms of what you are doing now. And actually, if you can get any better, you will get better because you know your job is threatened. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about networks that you can do. And Black Lives Matter is a classic example of that. That suddenly you're beginning to see everybody filming what happens on the streets of America to black people. And in their homes, as we discovered this last week, that that you can be sitting in your own home and somebody can enter it and kill you and then blame you for being black in your own home. And I think that is the power of a network like Black Lives to empower other people. That is the greatest thing about a network. It empowers others. It doesn't sit within itself. It really empowers others to make better work, to connect differently, to think differently, but ultimately to change. Ultimately to change, and that sort of they are interventions, and that we should be proud of them being interventions because it elicits change.
Nan, is there a particular transformation? I mean, you've had such a kind of extraordinary, prestigious kind of career and built up this remarkable scaled network. Is there a moment of transformation that you would point, which really personally, moved you or affected you, or for you just demonstrated the social impact in motion?
I think if I think of the most recent, I think Don gave a great example. I think the great thing is that we hope that I think a network is a channel for energy. So it brings people in a more action mode. And what we see, and that goes through the whole network or through all the people that are in these meetings with each other, talking all the challenges of the day, of the moment. And sometimes you see really long-lasting impacts happening. For instance, in the cities, we choose each year to work with two members in different cities in Europe, and one of the best examples was our meeting in Sofia, or the impact of our meeting in Sofia a few years ago, where there was really a very small contemporary art scene that was totally neglected by government, and now they are, thanks to the people we brought in our meeting and working on the local politicians, they now have their own center, they have a special strand for contemporary performing arts, they are collaborating in international networks, they have also international policy, cultural policy now. So it's sometimes, and then so you start with a mayor, a female, of course, female mayor, who was in favor of something, making something for her city, and she did that. And that can just happen by 4 days bringing 500, 700 people in a city talking about our art form and the importance for society. So yes, I think this is one of the examples. Another one is in Iran, where the dance scene is non-existent because it's forbidden. That when we come in Iran, there's a reason for them. That we were with only 15, 20 people in Iran in a small caravan, as we call it. But suddenly all the people involved in this underground movement of dance, which is underground there, came together, and since then they formed a network, a local network for dance, which didn't exist before that. It was all fighting for their own place, and now they are working together. So it's this type of, coming from afar, you can already bring people together because they suddenly realize that it's interesting to meet with others, and being in a city, you have the mass that can change things.
I wanted to ask you this. You're reminding me there's a amazing, I don't know if any people know the NGO Crisis Action, extraordinary organization, and they just published this book, a booklet called Creative Coalitions, a Handbook for Change. And in it, there's so much wisdom in it, but they had this really striking observation, and just hearing you talk, it really made me think about it, about the role of the visibility or invisibility of the networker or the network creator. And this observation was, one of the most important contributions may be that the general public have no idea who you are. The convener should be modest for themselves, committed to working behind the scenes at the service of the network's goals. This humility is invaluable. Being behind the scenes will dramatically increase the trust potential allies put in you. I've just been really struck by that, about the quiet hand and the power that often resides in networks that, that they just go about their business. And I wondered if that chimed with any of you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most powerful networks ultimately become movements. And a movement is something which is kind of pushed forward by individual actions in different places, in different contexts. And I think what's been really interesting about our experience is that there was this kind of under-the-radar understanding amongst men and women that the music industry needed to change, and it needed to change desperately. There was an urgent challenge there that people had somehow kind of been in denial about for way too long. And what's happened with just simply the knowledge that Keychange is there is it's enabled loads and loads of festivals all over the place to just decide that they can actually do something visible now about it, because it's somehow got some, credibility and official recognition, and they're not going to get into trouble if they start questioning very long-standing structures. So with Keychange, it's already kind of, rippling out beyond anything we can be involved with. There's too much happening for our part-time project manager and me to be at all the time. So that's just incredibly empowering to know that they're connecting with the value and the starting point and the brand, if you like, to put it in a more practical way. But they're doing it in their own way, and it's it's just growing. I suppose that's not dissimilar to something like Women of the World Festival, which is in a similar way. It's provided something that people can connect to and then interpret in the way that suits their situation.
I was going to mention WOW actually, because I think WOW is a great example of something that just that one person went, I'm just going to do this, I'm going to try this.
Yeah.
And then it just morphed and grew a life of its own and turned into something quite phenomenal. And actually, when you travel around the world and you witness the different wows, the different ways people interpret that notion that women of the world, to suit their culture and their space, and spaces where things are illegal or you can't do them. But there are these little spaces, like in Iraq, little spaces, and where you can have a wow festival and have a wow moment, and people will come together, and then the ripple effect. I think the beauty of the behind the scenes is the ripple effect of what happens with a good network that has intervention at its heart. The ripple is, you just sit back and. So the Creative Diversity Network, as I said, it is the 5 main broadcasters in the UK, as well as BAFTA and IETM and PACT, so the Production Alliance, and S4C, the Welsh language broadcaster, and every single one of them is in competition with everyone else, with each other. So what I've tried to do with the space, when they come into my space, we work collaboratively. And there is an understanding that we work collaboratively, and we have an end goal that we all agree on. The journeys, each of them can take their own journeys as individual businesses, but when you are a part of the network and the conversation you have within the network, it is a collaborative conversation. Now that means that I had to do a deal last year with them, which was I will do less, but I will do what I want to do, but I will do it in your time. So the things I wish to deliver, I've cut them in half, and I've given them twice as long to deliver them. But the agreement is when they come into this space, they are collaborators. They are not competitors. And they can be competitors for the rest of the time, but for 2 hours every 3 months, when they come into my space, we work together for our end goal. And it's challenging, but sometimes you sort of have to offer that.
Already achieved so much, but what's the dream in 5 years, 10 years? What does success look like if everything could progress and develop, from the base that you've got now? What's the stars? Where are we shooting for? Each of you, literally 30 seconds.
Okay, this may sound counterintuitive, but my success story would be that Keychange doesn't need to exist anymore. Because it's got a very clear starting point, and we all know exactly what we're trying to do. I hope that the network would continue to kind of exist in an informal way, and all of those connections might lead on to another kind of network that might have a slightly different focus. But for me, I don't think all networks should exist forever. I think they should be flexible things that kind of grow and ebb and flow, as does real life.
Thank you. Deborah.
Essentially, it's world domination. And I think that because it has to be, because we need to change the way that we engage with each other, and you can only do that by world domination. So that's basically what I perceive in 5 years' time is that I will be running the world from my little house in the West Midlands, and
that's why Keychange wouldn't need to exist anymore. So.
Exactly. So I'm tying things up here. I'm pulling all the strings together. That's basically it.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait to be your subjects and servants and anything else you need. We are at your disposal.
Marvelous.
Your
Thank
cultural
you so
army.
very much indeed.
Yeah. Nan,
Well,
for
I
you.
think we are all at the same page, more or less. I don't want IETM to stop within 10 years because I think we will still be needed, but it should be, I hope we will be more representative, have worked on inclusion and be a more diverse and more balanced network as it is now. That's why I have to ask you not to become a member, each of you, because we already have a big UK delegation. No, you're very welcome. You're very welcome.
She doesn't actually mean that, does she? She's like us. Yeah.
I will, come to Hull.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. You're magic. Thank you for your work. Thank you so much.